record. And all right, so hey everybody, this is Corey Huff from The Abundant Artist, and I'm here with Gwenn Seemel. Hi, Gwenn.
Hi.
So for those of you who don't know Gwenn, she's been on The Abundant Artist. We've interviewed her before. I've mentioned her in several blog posts. Gwenn is one of my art heroes. I love her work. I love the way that she goes about her work. Gwenn and I happen to live in the same town here in Portland, Oregon, and I really just think that Gwenn is an inspiration for artists out there everywhere. And the cool thing, and the reason that I wanted to have Gwenn around today, is Gwenn wrote this book. And when I read it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Gwenn wrote a book. And then I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh, Gwenn wrote a book. It's so good. And it's, it's available via PDF, and you can download it from her website, and I'll let her tell you about how to do that. But the book is called Art Marketing. And, a very simple title, but it's about a lot more than just how to market your work. And it really gets into the why you should market your work. And I think that that's really what's key, because there's a lot of resources out there about how to market your work and, how to build a website and how to get into a gallery and all of that stuff. But I think what's missing from the conversation is why we market our work. And now that I've talked so much, Gwenn, why don't you take a second and talk about the genesis for this book?
I think it's been a long time coming. I've been blogging for a while, so I've been sort of gathering material. When you blog, when you talk about, your process and stuff, you start to verbalize about things, and then you can do things like write a book. I mean, I think it's a lot easier when you've done a lot of that work ahead of time. So it's been coming for a while, and I think that originally it was about feeling a little bit of pushback from people in the art community about making a living as an artist. I think there's, on the one hand, people envy those who make a living solely with their work, but there's also a little bit of like, well, they must be a sellout, they must be doing something wrong. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how making a living from your work is not selling out, like the good things that happen from making. That's the origin of it.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's, I talk to so many artists about their work, and there's that sort of trite sayings that I'd rather be in the studio, and that's not any swipe against Alison Stanfield's book. I'd rather be in the studio. It's a great book, and she should continue, evangelizing that. But
no, I mean, I feel that way all the time. I don't know if you feel that way. Like I'd rather be doing that a lot of the time as well. Like I think I get where people have this pushback against making a living as an artist. I think there's so much more to it than money. There's so many other things that make it worthwhile, and I think we should focus on those too.
So what are those? You've got this book, and I read your book, and you talk about how the first reason to market your art is so that you can sell more art, so you can make more art. But that's the obvious answer, and you go a little bit deeper than that.
Well, I think it starts with this notion that art, this is not how I started in the book, but it starts with this notion that art is about communication to me. I think for some people it's about expression, so there's not necessarily someone else on the other end of that expression, but for me with communication there is someone else there, and so paying attention to that other person, and as in life, as we communicate, we learn how to do it better. Sometimes we get feedback of, wow, you're not really saying that in a way that's useful, and things like that. And so same as when you're making art, you start to get feedback about what is working or what is not. And maybe it's not necessarily something really obvious like, I meant for this piece of art to say X, and you think it said Y. It's not about that. It's like, oh, why did you think it said Y? Getting into what it is you're doing and the impact that it has on your community. And then being able to listen to that feedback in such a way that it's useful. So, someone makes a really negative comment about your art, and you're really sensitive about your art, it's hard to listen to what they're saying without getting hurt. But if you have a little bit more confidence, so that can be that you're making a living with your art, for example, that can help with confidence, you can really listen to what the other person is saying, and you can sort of dissect it a little bit, like, is this person saying this because of something in their own lives? Does that sort of mean that I don't have to listen to them at all? Or is there still something valuable in there? And really start to dig into that feedback in a way that I don't think you can do if you aren't confident in your work and the marketing of your work, so that the constant looking for feedback can help you find that confidence, because a lot of the times you're going to get positive feedback. We are social creatures. Most of us are very do have a group of friends who will support us, who will also give us honest critique, I hope, but who will support us and help us to find our voices in a nurturing way. So I'm not really sure what the question was, but communication, right? Art is communication.
Yeah,
and starting from there.
Yeah, so. I think we got there because we were talking about, why should you market your art?
Right.
And then there's the obvious answer of, so you can sell more art, so you can make more art. But then the act of marketing is an act of communication, right? And so when you are talking to people who, whether they're potential art buyers or they're other artists or they are critics or somebody else, there's a dialogue that happens in the artistic process, right?
It's another medium. I mean, when you think about it, people are storytellers. They tell stories for a living, right? That's their medium. That's their whatever. Maybe that's how they make a living, like I said. But in a sense, marketing is that it's talking to people and talking to people well. It's another way also that an artist can be creative. We don't have to follow certain conventions like maybe some businesses more non-artistic businesses do. They maybe have more conventions than we do. We have our own conventions that we can choose to follow or not, but it's another way for an artist to communicate, like you said, to express themselves, to reveal their own identity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the readers of The Abundant Artist, there's a tendency in the internet marketing world to sell systems, right? And you say, I'm going to sell you a marketing system, and if you follow my 3-step blueprint, you're going to make $1 million. And most artists that I know hate that kind of stuff because you're following a system, and it's really boring, and there's no creativity to it. And so I try to teach principles, right, and let artists govern themselves, right, to take those principles and expand on them. And I think you are somebody who takes the principles of marketing and really, you get it, you have a deep understanding, and you're creative with how you present your work. And for those who don't know you, maybe you can talk a little bit about the series that you have behind you and what the genesis for that was.
So it's a series of paintings of animals. They could just be pretty pictures of animals, but they're really specific animals. They're animals that in some way don't fit with our notions of what's natural or right for females and males. Species in which the girls are bigger than the boys are prettier than the girls, in which there's a lot of homosexuality, or where the family system isn't, boy plus girl equals babies and bliss. Something a little bit more real than that. And so the paintings are these paintings of these animals, but they're also illustrations for a book that's sort of a children's book. It's a little bit long for an actual children's book, but it's meant to deconstruct those gender roles also, because we learned a lot of those gender roles as kids, and so I thought the kids' book would be a good way to take it apart, like by saying things like boys can become girls, and several different kinds of boys and things like that. So using that kind of language to talk about the diversity of nature. And the series originated in the fact that I have endometriosis, which is a disease which often causes infertility. And I kind of feel like when you say the word infertility, sometimes people's eyes glaze over because they care, but they're also like, it's not very easy to relate to, I think, unless you've gone through that experience yourself. And you want to be caring, but it's hard to. And I realized that I wanted to talk about infertility in a way that was more vital to people. And so then I realized after that infertility, not being able to reproduce, is one of those things that, that has to do with sexuality and with gender and with expectations that our society has, and that there's a lot of other things that are similar to infertility in that sense, like, that men shouldn't stay home with the kids, or that women shouldn't pursue their careers vigorously, or, things like that. So I realized that by broadening the scope of who is messing with gender roles or who is deviating from them in some way, we could all come together, and it was a lot more interesting than just talking about infertility.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there that I want to pull out. Is you had this thing that was going on with you that you really wanted to express. And I think that's where most artists stop. They have something inside of them that they want to express. And so they create a piece of art, and that's it. And there's a couple of other things that you did. You thought about it a little more deeply. Like, how do other people perceive this issue? And what are other issues that are similar to this?
Right.
And what are the experiences of those people who have these other issues? And how can I talk to them? And then take all of that and put that into my art, right? And that there is the basis for marketing.
Right.
Right? It's basis for a conversation.
Right. Yeah. Inviting more people into the conversation, more experiences into the conversation, yeah.
Yeah. And it sort of relates to the principles of entrepreneurship and product development. I come from the technical world, the technology world, and there's all this talk about finding a problem and then presenting a solution to that problem. And art doesn't so much present solutions, right? It creates conversations.
It asks more questions.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of value to that, and people find value in that. And some of what we sort of as a collective world of artists have identified as the great art really address those things, right? Not to get all like artsy-fartsy art school on everybody, but I think it's really important. So let me ask you this: how is this incorporating your own stuff and these other issues? How has that affected your marketing? Like, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing very well. I think actually a big surprise, a big marketing lesson from this series actually was that by doing a book, and that's how it came out of me. It wasn't like I was doing this on purpose at all. But by doing a book, the show has a lot longer of a life. And I'm not talking about a catalog, which is more like something that you buy to remind you of a great show that you saw. I'm talking about a book with its own narrative, its own thing. It's its own piece. So by making that, I've actually been able to, in a sense, like get a lot more mileage out of the art. I don't have to show it again, which doing a physical exhibition is a lot of work, and but I still get to have people having conversations because it's in this book. This is the expression is a book, and so that was an unexpected aha for me, a good discovery that I made. Talking about endo and talking about infertility, this is sort of a little bit off topic from what you're asking, but I think I do make some people uncomfortable because I talk about it a lot. I make myself uncomfortable, frankly. It's not easy. It does get easier, and I feel good about it. I feel like it's the right path for me, even though it has that discomfort to it. So that's another rewarding aspect of this work, is that it sort of made me come out as someone with endo, and in a way that felt really powerful and really good. So.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, there's a whole world of people out there who deal with that, right? And similar issues. And so when you talk about finding potential collectors and potential fans who identify not only with endometriosis, but also with all of the other issues that are discussed in your series. So I think, good on you for taking the time to explore that. So for artists who are maybe not quite as far along in their career as you are, who are still trying to figure out, how do I market myself? How do I take a series that I have and turn that into an idea that people will latch onto? You've done it a couple times now. How do you go from incubation to execution? I'm going to ask you to distill years and years of experience and knowledge into a couple of minutes.
I think that for me, a lot of it has to do with with reading and taking in other people's work, whether that's writing or other art. Right now, I'm in this phase that I really love, where I've just thought of my topic for my next series, and so now it's all about reaching out. I mean, part of the way that I found that next topic was through reading and was through looking at other people's art. But now I get to really reach out and dig into it. And this is the exciting part where I'm not really talking about, I haven't told you what it is. I'm not going to tell anyone really what it is yet. I'm not still in that, phase where you're really protective of it because you don't really know. I don't know what it is yet exactly. I have a vague idea. And so then I like to really dig into something before, like research-wise, before I get into expressing about it. I'm actually there's a small series of paintings that I made when I was in this phase for the show that I talked about, Crime Against Nature, that I'm only just finishing now. So it was like this mini series of self-portraits of me thinking about what femininity means to me, what my female identity means to me. And I'm glad that I'm finishing them, but they're kind of boring in my opinion. They don't really do what I like my art to do, which is really, try to open the conversation up to more people. They feel really personal. Now, I'm not saying that people will react to them that way. It's possible that people will really enjoy them. But for me, they feel kind of closed and kind of like me, in my studio doing my work. So I expect I'll be doing some of that work for this next series now, sort of these experiments, sort of feeling. And I think that is important, is to do a little bit of stuff that may or may not, you may not finish it, but do some feeling around in your studio as you start to develop this idea. Just sitting down and doing the paintings and knowing that they're exactly right. I don't really know who does that, who just plans it all out and then does it, I do think that there's a lot of feeling around that goes on.
Okay. So in your book, you talk a little bit about context. And context, the way that you put it in the book is so fun because you kind of smack people in the face with how important context is, in a good way. I don't think it's not negative. It's just like the context in which you present your work to somebody makes all the difference in the world. And it takes it from being something that is, oh, okay, that's a piece of art, to, oh, that piece of art grabs me and says something. So how do you break down context, and how do you think about context?
Well, I want to talk actually a little sort of, again, off to the side of your question briefly. Recently, a CIA agent actually came out and confirmed something that there's been rumors about for years, which is that the modern art movement, so Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, those kinds of artists, were promoted by the US government as propaganda, as sort of like the pinnacle of rugged individualism that the US wanted to promote to the world, a world that was interested in communism and socialism. So it was supposed to be sort of the antidote to the social realism movements of art.
Right.
And people have talked about this for years, but recently an agent came out and talked about how they actually did it. And the reason why this comes up when I think about context is because these artists had no idea. They probably wouldn't have really liked, they probably had some socialist leaning themselves. They weren't that into the idea of the CIA promoting them. But I guess the point that I want to make there, and why it has to do with context, is that there's a lot of stuff going on around you, and you're not going to be able to control all of it. You can try, you can think. Like a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, I have this interest in how humans think about the future. I want to do this series called Everyday Prophets, and it's about how humans think about the future. And I'm going to do it for 2012, because that's when, well, some people at the Mayan calendar said the world was going to end. And so I was trying to sort of...
Gwenn, hang on a second.
Yeah.
You cut out for a second. So you said that you said that you were the prophets of the future, and you were going to do it for 2012, and that's where you cut out.
Okay, so I was going to do it for 2012 because that's when the Mayan calendar, or supposedly, was predicting an end of the world. And so I wanted to, I guess in a sense, like, be a part of that moment of world ending. We all are thinking about it. And for a variety of reasons that had to do with health, I didn't end up doing that series for 2012. I ended up, taking this sidetrack. And in the end, I'm glad, because you can try to get the context just right. But like, I'm going to make a series about the world ending when everyone thinks the world is going to end. You know, you can really try to manipulate it in a really, you can really try it, but ultimately you're not going to get all of those things right. You maybe aren't going to hit, frankly, in a situation where everyone thinks the world is going to end. If you're making art about the world ending, you're just going to be one more voice. You know, I mean, that is part of it, right? If it is such so in the air, you're not going to be the only one making that interesting point. So again, I don't really feel like I answered the question. Did I at all?
A little bit, and I think it's interesting because there's not a lot of straightforward answers, right? I think one of the things that I take away from talking to you and talking to some of the other artists that I really admire is that you sort of have to think deeply, learn how things work, learn how marketing works, and then make it your own. And then there's a lot of trial and error, right? I mean, we all...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we do things that don't work. And
we mess up. And that's how we learn, right?
Yeah.
But I think also making it your own is important. You talked about earlier, you referred to the systems that people are promoting, sort of the how-tos. And you have to find a way to enjoy this. If it feels like a pain to you, it's gonna feel like a pain on the other end too. Your audience is gonna know that you're not enjoying it and is not going to be invited into the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Gwen, how would somebody go about getting your book?
It's pretty much all over my website right now. I'm announcing it. There's a free version of the book that's available on my site. You have to be online to read it. But then if you wanted to purchase the PDF, it's $3, and you can download it that way. So
okay, and it's GwennSeemel.com, right?
Right, yes.
We'll put up a link to the site.
Cool. Thank you.
You bet. So just hang on a second.
Yeah.